So I guess this is a little bit late for me to be welcoming you to my hometown, but specifically in this room, we, Baruch Hashem, made 2 chasanas, numerous dinners for Chabad here in this very room, and I want to thank you for giving us, Baruch Hashem, yet another wonderful, association with this place. There's a colonel. Is this too close? Is this better? We're okay? There's a colonel in the reserves of the Israel Defense Forces. His name is Yalon. As a young adult, he found himself increasingly interested in Yiddishkeit, and he started to become Shomer Torah Mitzvahs. This wasn't just his personal interest. He went on to develop a whole educational program for pre-army service and for active duty soldiers to learn more about Yiddishkeit. Along the way, someone said to him, "You know, with your enthusiasm, it seems very clear that you must have had some connection to Chabad in your early years. This kind of fire doesn't just show up." He asked his father, his mother had since passed away, who told him that in fact when he was a child, and they lived in America for a few years, that he knew, but that at that time he went to a Chabad gan. And yes, he remembers that, the father remembered that this little boy really liked saying brachot on food, celebrating chagim, telling stories. The colonel has no conscious memory of this time in his life. In fact, he grew up thinking he went to Gan in Israel. But in a fascinating story of Hashgacha Pratis, he did connect to the shluchim in America whose Gan he attended. I actually remember him as a little boy because my mother, Mrs. Risya Posner, Aleha Shalom, was his teacher. And it was in the Gan that she started that the fire was lit that illuminates his life and the lives of so many others. I started my own teaching career in that school in Nashville, Tennessee. Every year, my mother would start in service for the staff with a reminder that the child that loves their Morah will love Hashem, love being Jewish, and love the Torah. As assistant principal for 10 years in Massachusetts, and for over 25 years in the early childhood center that my husband and I founded here in Stamford, that's how I started in service for my teachers as well. And I thought I understood that idea. I thought it was geared to those teaching a non-observant population. Now I think I seriously underestimated the wisdom in my mother's saying. The theme of this kinus, which I am thrilled to say vastly exceeded my expectations on so many levels, a huge yasher koach to the organizers and the presenters, is Neiter Karmei, translated in the book as Tending the Garden. This closing talk is entitled, One Mission in Many Forms, the Kaleidoscope of Chabad Chinuch, and as the description goes on, Chabad Chinuch has many faces, from the Hebrew Day School or aftercare program, to a cheder classroom or large Anash school, and many other iterations in between. I think I myself have attended just about all of those, I was a student in all of those settings. What is the driving mission that unites all of these faces of chinuch? What makes each of these forms of chinuch uniquely Chabad? On the surface, these various settings seem to indicate huge differences. But if we use the lens that the Rebbe guides us to use, if we look at the underlying reality, we will find the same core throughout. The different modalities used to deal with all of the differences are really not what chinuch is about. They're important, but not in comparison with the core, the really big ideas. Let's take 3 of those. Number 1, presume competence. Believing that a person has a neshama that comes into this world with a specific mission that is crucial to the purpose of creation, namely that this world should become the beautiful garden it is meant to be and not the jungle it sometimes resembles. All of that means that I know that you inherently have what you need to do this, including the ability to learn and grow and accomplish great things. I am not here to give you something new that you, the student, don't already have. I can support you as you learn and grow. I can shine a light on what you have already inside of you, even if you don't know it. In a similar vein, my husband often says that a chassid is not someone who believes in the Rebbe. One does not have to be a chassid for that. Rather, it is someone who knows that the Rebbe believes in him or her. In the 1980s, a little girl living in a typical suburban American community stepped out of her comfort zone, and because it was a Hakhel year, she shared a little talk about this at a friend's birthday party. Her father then suggested that she write a letter to the Rebbe about what had happened, and she did. She got a written reply from the Rebbe addressed to her personally. She was 7. Just parenthetically, many years later, she said that what made the deepest impression on her was seeing her father's excitement about the letter that the Rebbe sent her. The Rebbe regularly entrusted 14 and 15-year-olds with responsibilities and corresponded with them about their work. They, of course, saw themselves as chassidim among all of the other chassidim, carrying out the Rebbe's vision. They weren't waiting to become grown-ups. And when we use that lens to look at others, in the late 1940s, when refugees from Stalinist Russia were preparing to settle in America, there was a young yeshiva bacher who, for whatever reason, was going to be traveling alone. Many in the Chabad community then living in France gave him strong warnings about the trials and tribulations that awaited him, with pretty dire predictions of what they thought a bacher alone would amount to. Years later, he said that there was one chassid, Rabbi Yisrael Neveler, who warmly blessed him with success, repeating several times, "You're going to be fine, just fine," and gave him a big kiss on the cheek. This bacher said that indeed he did face terribly difficult temptations, but it was that warme chassidische kush that held him. Which leads me to the second idea, connection. Connection is more than love. It's focused love. It's not about me. It's about you. Nothing can happen if there is no connection. And while we can easily claim to love our students, and it might be true, but if they're not feeling connected, the love really doesn't count for much. How do we make that connection happen? By meeting their emotional needs, because when we do that, they're connected, and a connected child is a willing child. Navigating emotions is all in Tanya, but not everyone can unpack Tanya and put it into practice so easily, even if they're scholars. In a discussion I had just yesterday with one of the presenters, I learned of a sikha, I believe in Parshas Emor, in Tinasei 57-51, 1991, where the Rebbe speaks about Or Chayzer, the light of Torah that is now being reflected back to us through some Chachmas Chitzenius. The Rebbe's encouragement of the psychiatrist Dr. Viktor Frankl is a dramatic example of this. The gem My Encounter interview with the Shliach to Austria, Rabbi Yaakov Biederman, tells this fascinating, fascinating story. Dr. Shia Twersky, Dr. Abraham J. Twersky, as it says on his books, a chassid who has done tremendous work in the field of emotional health, gives a great mashal for the relationship of emotional health and Torah. A fellow brings his broken down car to a mechanic who fixes everything. The carburetor, the alternator, the transmission, the fuel pump. Aren't you impressed? Just rattle that off. Fixes the whole thing. The fellow comes to pick up his now perfectly running car and turns to the mechanic and says, "But I have a problem. I don't know where to go." A proper understanding of emotional health can fix our systems, but it is Torah that shows us where to go. A teacher who competently navigates the emotional world of the child now has a connected partner willing and able to study Torah, the roadmap on the journey of life. The third key factor is our own authenticity. When a child sees that we are genuine, that what we teach is real in our own lives, they have solid ground under their feet. We can be trusted. I studied in Beis Rivka in Brooklyn from 6th grade through seminary. For the first 3 years, I was a grade behind in Limudei Kodesh, and it was in my 4th year, in 9th grade, that I was finally able to be in my real grade. And Baruch Hashem, I had a very, very good year. And at the end of that year, I wrote a letter to the Rebbe thanking the Rebbe for Beis Rivka. And one of the things that I wrote specifically was about my teachers. And what I wrote was that the teachers that I had in Beis Rivka, they don't just teach subjects, they care about every one of the girls. And the Rebbe answered my letter, Tach al habsuras tevis, thank you for the good news, and gave me a bracha. A memory from those years that keeps surfacing in these weeks of preparation for the Kinus took place on Monday, the 8th day of Tishrei, in 5725, 1964. The day of the week and the date of the month are crystal clear in my mind. It was the day after Rebbe Tzimchana's Levaya. I was in 9th grade. One of the teachers we had that year was a very dignified, reserved woman who taught in what I suppose was a very European style in the earlier part of the 20th century. She dictated word for word, and we wrote what she said. The subject, by the way, was Likutei Sichos. I remember that we were very amused by her very rich Yiddish vocabulary. But what strikes me now as remarkable is that our usually rambunctious class was very cooperative and reserved throughout the year. I think I know why. On that sad Monday, in the beginning of the school year, our teacher, Rebbe Tzimchadakov, Allah Shalom, could not teach. She stood at her desk and cried. We didn't move a muscle. I cannot remember if that was the end of study for the day or if she was finally able to teach. But our normal obnoxious behavior was held in check all year because she was genuine and authentic, and we just knew to respect that. Recently, a SEM girl was describing for me what clicked for her in the Chabad seminary she attended. It was our teachers, she said. It wasn't just, we're Chabad, so these are our traditions, so on this day we do this, and on this day we do that. I'm not sure if I've got the tone exactly right, but I'm sure you get the idea. But something they clearly live with, clearly feeling that they are holding the biggest truths of life, the best life, and what a blessing that is. And we wanted that. There is a letter from the Rebbe, written Rosh Chodesh Shvat, Tavshin Yud Aleph, that keeps pulling me in. In this letter, the Rebbe responds to a question many had addressed to him, how to mark the upcoming Yartzeit, the first Yartzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Among the various directives is one that I think must have been very unconventional for that time, 1951. The Rebbe urges those, and the English it's a translation. The Hebrew is so rich and so beautiful, but in the interest of time, I'll just do most of it in English. Though the Rebbe urges those, quote, who are fit for the task to visit centers of observant youth and in a neighborly spirit should make every endeavor to also visit centers for the young people who are not yet observant in order to explain to them. And I'm going to pause just for a second and think, what do you think? Let me ask you, what do you think? What is the first thing that the Rebbe is saying that the young people in 1951 in America and beyond need to know about the Rebbe? The first thing. In order to explain to them the warm love, the warm love that the saintly Rebbe constantly had for them. You see? Connection? And only after that, the Rebbe goes on. It should be explained to these people what he expected of them. They should be told of the hope and the trust that he placed in them, that they would ultimately fulfill their task of strengthening the observance of Judaism and disseminating the study of Torah, b'chol hameretz hachem v'hachayis shehem misgulas haneir, with all the energy, the warmth, and vitality that characterize youth. No matter what subject we are teaching, the underlying belief that what teachers do in the classroom is the most important work in the world is what inspires students like that little boy in my mother's preschool class over 50 years ago, on fire to change the world for good, for real, and forever. That's what we mean when we say Mashiach. And in the classic bracha that Chassidim give, L'chaim and zal uisfiren de kavana. May we be zeicha to be part of bringing this vision to fruition now. Thank you.